Welcome to the virtual STEM K12 showcase, an event in partnership with EduGrowth strategic partner ClickView and supported by Study New South Wales. I'm Delveen Nielsen, the Head of Customer Success at ClickView, and I'm absolutely delighted to be the MC for today's exciting program, so welcome. Before we continue, however, I'd like to pause for an acknowledgement of country. So as we gather today physically dispersed and virtually connected, allow me to pause and acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise the continuous and unbroken connection to the land, waters and culture across the country. Today, I join you from the traditional land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I extend all our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I add specifically my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present with us today. Today's program is going to showcase the innovation of some really exciting Australian EdTech products and dedicated programs to deliver engaging STEM project-based learning, particularly in the COVID context. This afternoon, we'll kick off with our pitch showcase of our 4 Australian EdTech products focused on maximising student engagement in a digital environment. First, we'll have James Curran, the CEO at Grok Academy, showcasing Grok Learning, followed by Neuranext, presented by Adrian Tyson, the founder of Neuranext. And then we have Darcy Jamieson, the Director of Global Partnerships at Matific, who will showcase the Matific solution. And the final company will be Buzzy Games, presented by Mark Gardner.
I've got no audio here. I've got no audio at all.
Sorry, David, can you hear me? Fantastic. It looks like I can be heard. So I will continue. And the final, sorry, I will just repeat that. The final company will be Buzzy Games, presented by Mark Gardner, the CEO of Buzzy Games. So just, I guess, a couple of housekeeping messages. Can you please use the Q&A features on the Slido platform to engage with other audience members? And if you have any questions to ask our presenters directly, please submit them through the questions tab and we'll be sure to answer those. At 4 p.m, it will be my pleasure to be joined by Malyn Mawby, the Head of Personalised Learning at Roseville College, and her colleague Nikki Shires, the Head of Digital Technologies, as well as the STEAM Club Coordinator at Roseville College. We'll be discussing how project-based learning gives students that really authentic learning experience and explore how teachers have developed project-based learning programs for STEM and other cross-curricular disciplines and how they can be best presented in the classroom as well as online. I would now like to hand over to David Lenke, the Managing Director at EduGrowth, to offer an official welcome to you all.
Hi, Delveen, can you hear me? Hi, Delveen, can you hear me?
I can now, David. Lovely to have you.
I think we were having a little bit of a technical problem there, I think. So thank you so very much. It's really exciting to be able to have this first showcase for the year where we get to connect with some fantastic educators thinking about what the future of education looks like and how technology can enable that, and hear from some really innovative New South Wales EdTech companies. So my name's David Lenke. I'm the Managing Director of EduGrowth, and we are Australia's education technology and innovation industry hub. Through connection and collaboration, we accelerate the Australian EdTech ecosystem locally and internationally. We're truly honoured to be able to partner with a range of incredible education institution, corporates and EdTech leaders from across Australia and around the world. We were founded by some truly innovative universities and corporations, and we thank them for their vision and ongoing support. Today we have the support of one of our fantastic strategic partners, ClickView, and Study New South Wales, who is the event partner today. So thanks for all the support. I'll hand over to you, Delveen, to get the showcase started.
Fantastic. Well, on to the next exciting step of the agenda. I'd now like to welcome James from Grok Learning to the stage. James, if you'd like to join us, and we can then just confirm that your screen share is working.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me and see me all right?
We can.
Excellent. All right, I'll start my timer and get underway then. So welcome, folks. My name's James Curran. I'm the CEO at Grok Learning and one of the 3 authors of the Australian Curriculum Digital Technologies. So I'm going to start by talking about what we see as one of the problems, which is that digital technologies is hard to deliver in schools. The key reason is there are very few qualified computing teachers, and most computing around the world, and digital technology specifically in Australia, is taught by out-of-field teachers. In addition to that, teachers don't have the time or the support necessary to learn technical skills like coding as well. So how do we deal with this problem while still provide quality education for our students? Support them in learning technically challenging material, provide them quality and timely feedback, and assess students effectively and support those that are struggling. And our answer in the Grok Learning platform is for students and teachers to be able to learn digital technologies together. And the way they do that is within the Grok Learning interactive learning environment. Our courses involve interactive steps, so you can see an example here of your first Hello World program. And students are walked through step at a time the stages they need to solve a particular problem. We provide automated feedback, which gives students immediate feedback. We cover the curriculum in Australia, the digital technologies curriculum, and I can say that as one of the authors. And we have a range of content that's both project-based and coursework-based. The Grok Learning model is a mixture of courses and competitions. So we have courses that you can use at any time during the school year. For example, the DT Challenges courses have had over 250,000 students use them around Australia in the last few years. And our Cyber Challenges have had students over the last 2 years, 105,000 students involved. We also have competition mode, which is over a 5-week period, we have a structured competition where you learn to code while competing, which is still quite an innovative, unusual model. Let me just show you a quick sample of some of our courses. We've got Blockly-based visual programming courses for years 2 through to year 6. We've got Scratch, MakeCode, and Python is available for a range of courses, both in course and competition mode. In addition to that, the platform provides a lot of help. So if you're writing your first ever Python program and you might get stuck on a bit of syntax, we have ways of explaining what that syntax error is and helping you get unstuck. We've got courses in web development as well. And if you're a fan of logo graphics and Turtle, then we've got that as well as a microbit simulator for Python and Blockly and in MakeCode. If you're using Grok Learning in schools, then you have a very simple subscription model where you estimate your usage at the beginning of the year and pay only once. If you have extra students involved, or you convince another teacher to give Grok a go, then it costs you absolutely nothing extra. And there's a whole bunch of free content on the platform as well, supported by our industry partners, for example, the cybersecurity challenges. And to monitor progress, we have a teacher dashboard that allows you to assign courses, export marks, and so on, and see a live classroom where you can tell exactly what your students are doing right now. Finally, I'll just quickly mention at the end that Grok Learning and the Australian Computing Academy, which is the centre that I ran at the University of Sydney, are merging together to form Grok Academy, a not-for-profit. You might have seen this on social media in the past, but that is coming now. The ACA staff have moved across and the Grok Learning staff will move across in the next couple of months. And we look forward to serving you as Grok Academy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and perfectly timed, by the way. So you've done very, very well. At this point, I'd love to hand over, and Adrian, we'll just do a cross-check that we can actually see your slides as well.
Yeah, all right. I'll just get them up now. Start. Is that looking okay?
I can't see anything at this point, but yes, there we go. Perfectly on time.
Excellent. No worries. Well, I will press my timer and start as well. So my company, Neuranext, is a company that we are teaching students about artificial intelligence through a series of school-based incursions or after-school programs and holiday programs as well. And what we're trying to do is to spark student interest in the technology of AI by breaking it down and showing them how it actually operates and where they're already using it, how it's already enmeshed in their lives already, which they know it is, but they don't know where it is. So it's one of those things that we talk about. We have the Creative Kids status as well. So that's one of the New South Wales initiatives there to help with the costs of courses. And we also have a NESA approved course for artificial intelligence called AI in the Future Focused School, which is in that interim arrangement with NESA at the moment, but has been reissued with that to address some of those digital technology outcomes. We're also part of the AWS EdStart program and NVIDIA's Inception program with all of our programs that we take into schools. And one of the things that we do, particularly to engage students, is we bring a big autonomous robotic car driving track, and we start with the old style of completing a task like that, and then we move through the training of a car, and then finally to the deployment of an autonomous self-driving car. So that's one way that we engage students with the technology, and something that they all super keen on self-driving and know and love that sort of part of the technology. We've been lucky enough to be hosted by the Microsoft Store, and in the next school holidays we're going to be at Ansto there at Lucas Heights as well, running a program for students. So we've been to a few places like that. This is an example here from a school, Cherrybrook Public School, where we're there delivering the course and getting students involved with AI. And there's a picture of me there showing them they've been live classified by some computer vision there. So yeah, we've Neuranext.ai is where you can find out about us, and yeah, we really appreciate being able to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Some really interesting, as a parent of a primary school student, some really interesting concepts that you're exploring there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to welcome Darcy from Matific. Perfect. Your slides are ready to go. Over to you, Darcy.
Sorry, I'll go off mute. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to be talking about maths and the M in STEM. And it's I think it's good to sort of start on like why we talk about STEM, what's predicating it. And it's this idea that for the jobs of the future, we're going to need all these people who are skilled, the scientists, engineers, programmers, but we're not getting there. We're just not getting the graduates that we need to really fulfill the jobs of the future. And so we're investing in STEM, we're investing in the science, technology, but a lot of the time when we think of STEM, I think most people think of science, technology, and engineering, but they forget about the maths. But the issue is maths is the glue that holds all of it together. Without maths, STEM falls apart. And that's why we were started. That's why Matific's there, to put the M in STEM. Because really, when we look at teaching, it hasn't changed much. When I went to school, this is how I was taught. When you went to school, I'm pretty sure this is how you were taught as well. And so we have digital products out there, and all they were doing was putting worksheets on a screen. And they weren't really revolutionizing what mathematics education should be. And we see poor performance. We're not seeing it, we see it. And we sort of think of these in like three key areas. In primary school education, teachers go to university and study teaching. They don't study mathematics. So what happens is they end up emphasizing procedure instead of conceptual understanding. And when students don't learn like deep understanding of the mathematics curriculum, they can't build the interconnecting links between the topics. They can't really develop their mathematical critical thinking skills. And so when maths becomes more abstract, we see math anxiety. And by the time the students are getting to year 11 and 12, they're not studying maths at all, let alone going into the tertiary fields. And so that's why Matific was developed. And it's a digital learning resource for primary school students that combines thousands of adaptive, personalized learning activities that are aligned to the curriculum with a rigorous pedagogy that engages students and impacts their learning. Matific works in 3 levels. It engages students through rich story-based activities. Engage students then love mathematics. And then we combine that with thousands of powerful tools for teachers to really help them focus on the important things, which is teaching, as opposed to the administrative tasks that can fill up their days. And we do that through a number of different styles of activities. We have our episodes, which are interactive, gamified activities that develop conceptual understanding. And they can be done as a group work, or they can be done individually on a personalized learning pathway. We offer worksheets and word problems. We understand their place in the curriculum. We understand the importance of fluency. And then we offer workshops, which are almost like digital laboratories for teachers and students to interact with, to work in groups, to interrogate concepts, and to really get a deep understanding of mathematical concepts as they sort of arise throughout the school year. And that's a very brief overview of Matific and why we really place mathematics as a key part of the STEM fields. And we never want to forget why mathematics is a fundamental part of the STEM fields.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Darcy, for sharing all of that information about Matific with us. That's wonderful. Thanks so much. And now I'll hand over to Mike from Buzzy Games. Over to you, Mike. Mike, we're just having a little bit of audio issues. You might have to unmute.
There we go. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike. I'm the founder and CEO of Buzzy Games. And at Buzzy Games, we provide a cloud platform and co-teaching to be able to enable any educator or parent around the world to help kids get a head start in collaboration and creativity. For us, we're in the starting of our mission to build a community of 100 million kids globally. So for us, collaboration and creativity are some of the key now skills, and not so much even future skills that we want to unlock in these kids. But we see some challenges here, and it's not lack of access or lack of technology. Like some of the other founders here have mentioned today, the real problem is lack of access and accessibility. And this is where we can come in and have done some great work. So what do? Well, we provide game design projects that can be delivered in class or at home alongside coaches that help co-teach classrooms and help parents across the globe. These are projects that kids love to do. And it really makes learning multiplayer at a deep level, a level that the kids absolutely love. So we're talking about game design projects that cover or used by games like Roblox and Minecraft and word puzzle games. Things that can enable group work in class and for kids at home, homeschooled or in lockdown, to connect with other kids around the world and to have the experience of what it's like to team up and be involved in a project that you love and watch that project develop and watch it get published and then played or experienced by other people. This is a key difference for us. We see people around the world doing great work in STEM, but for us, we want to give kids authentic experiences with projects. So we don't want to give them throwaway projects or tutorials. We want them to have that experience of building something that's their own. We do this around the world. Like I mentioned, last year we had some great outcomes or results in the remote regions of Northern Queensland and WA in the Pilbara. And we saw over the space of a week and a half, 500 kids in remote classrooms with many schools with kids that have only 5% of them have internet at home. We saw them experience this STEM education for the first time. And in these classrooms, the kids were learning to create, design, and even be exposed to some coding in a group environment and with the support of our teachers. And what we also love is that experience was delivered to those kids for just $2.50 per student, which is something that previously was unheard of in the cost and has been one of those barriers to delivering this sort of experience. For the kids that can and want to continue at home, we have a live remote coaching platform that can help those kids be teamed up with others. And for us, our growth is all about or tied to collaboration. So that's how we've managed to grow 10x for the last 10 years and 40% month on month for the last 3 months. We're on target to reach 100,000 active kids by the end of this year and 1 million for the next. We want to continue to collaborate. So any of the companies here today or any of the education partners and providers, we'd love to chat to you and see if our tools and our support can help you in your missions as well. Also, for the educators here today, we've got trial project kits. So please, if you're interested or if there's some way we can help you in game design, even if you've just got a question, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or email me, and I'm happy to help in any way. That web address there will allow you to apply for a trial kit, and I'll make sure that you get priority if you're here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate all of your insight about your wonderful programs. Thanks again.
No problem.
What we'll be doing now is just opening up to some Q&A, so I can see some questions that are flowing through. And what we might do is just kick off, first of all, with James from Grok Learning. So there's a couple of questions dedicated to you, which I might kick off with, if that's okay. I guess the first question is, what's the main reason that schools are purchasing your product? Is it for curriculum, part of the curriculum, or is it extracurricular?
Oh, absolutely. So the vast majority of schools are using it as their in-classroom activity for a period of 5 or more weeks during the year. So if they participate in our competitions, then they'll use the content specifically during that 5-week period, where we also have volunteer tutors from the IT industry involved there as well. So it gives teachers that additional backup of knowing there's an expert behind them. But the majority, I'd say 95% of our students are signing up through their school and using it in class, but then also as a homework activity. And then there's a bunch of kids that are doing it on their own, where the school doesn't even know that they're participating and having a great time too.
Fantastic. So maybe if we can dive a little bit deeper around the curriculum side and through the schools, what's been the feedback from teachers so far?
So first of all, teachers absolutely love the automated marking, because I don't know a single teacher that wants to sit there ticking things when a computer can do a much better job of exactly that. They want to be able to focus on the kids that need their help, and they want the kids that are powering ahead to be able to keep going, getting that immediate and intelligent feedback about where they're up to, so they can keep progressing. They also love the level of engagement. So the fact that the kids can see the little green diamonds and they're progressing and ticking off everything as they go along. And we're not huge on gamification, but there's enough there that it helps students. And then the final thing is there's a bit of a love-hate relationship with the automatic marking, in that it's very precise and requires students to do exactly what the question asks of them. And when students get used to that, eventually they love it, because they're really confident that they've got something right when they get that tick. But it takes a bit of time for them to get used to really reading the question carefully and doing exactly what it says.
Perfect. So I guess one final question for you, James. We've talked about feedback from teachers, but what about students? What do they love the most about using the platform?
The students love the fact that they're learning a new superpower. And it's one that they're not learning elsewhere. They first hit it and they discover it's a thing that they're actually really good at, especially if they're in a group like girls, for example, that traditionally have not been encouraged by society to be techie and nerdy, and discovering that they're really good at that. And in particular, we've seen that in courses like our cybersecurity challenges, where girls actually do a far better job of sleuthing information about people online and things like that. And that's led to a greater confidence in them than going on to the more technical content as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for that additional insight, James. Thanks so much. I guess over to you, Adrian. AI, complex technology, blows my mind a little bit. How do you go about teaching this to school students, and particularly primary students?
For sure. So, well, I come at it from the teacher perspective, because I'm a teacher first. And originally a course that we developed, that we were teaching, a colleague of mine's a PhD in this area, and we were teaching it to up in at a university in Beijing to doctoral level students. So well, I basically was looking at that course, and how we can break that down so students can understand it. With an example like computer vision, going a deep dive into that with students and show how pixels are, the building blocks of a digital image, and how, particularly with a grayscale image, for ease of, and make it easy for the students to understand how that's turned into numerical values, and how you can see there's a big change in the numbers. So there's an edge, and that's how edge detection works. And we do a few tasks along those lines. And when you convert the pixels into numbers, you can still see digit, like a written digit, like the number 8, for instance. When it's converted to numerical values, they can still visualize, and they can understand how the computer can make sense of that. Whereas, when you just say, how does a computer know what's in an image? It's a really tough thing to sort of get your head around. So that's an example of how just breaking it down into easy steps that students can understand, with really concrete and clear examples of what we're trying to get across. And that just, as I said, just to spark their interest and to demystify the technology. That's sort of how we approach it.
Fantastic. And obviously there's been, all of you have kind of alluded to some confidence around the use of technology in the STEM space. So what's the aim of your Teacher PD course?
The aim of the PD course is to get teachers up to speed with the technology. There's so much information out there, so much misinformation out there about what AI is and what it can do. And the course is just is the start of their AI journey, to get them to understand what it actually is, how it actually works, how it may affect our lives of our students, in the very short future. You know, we discuss the problem of deep fakes and how the critical thinking of our students is going to have to radically alter from what it was in the past. So things like that, there's a lot of discussion about that stuff, that side of it, not just the hard tech side of it as well. So a bit of those two things. So when a teacher has done the course, I want them to confidently be able to communicate to their students about AI, about what it is. And there's a lot of follow-up materials that they can build upon to go forward with their class as well after it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Adrian. Appreciate your additional insights as well. Darcy, we're going to kick over to you actually. So one of the first questions we're going to understand is, what's the key thing you think is important to review when evaluating EdTech for schools?
I guess, at least, especially for a math product or maybe a literacy product, is to ensure that the pedagogy leads the technology. So a lot of the time, there's a lot of EdTech products out there where technology comes first and it doesn't really actually enrich the classroom. And if it's not enriching the classroom, it's not really helping you in the classroom. So ensuring that the product has a strong pedagogy that meshes with you as an educator, sort of your philosophy of education, your school's philosophy of education, something that's really going to help your students learn. And so like at Matific, we've placed sort of conceptual understanding really at the heart of our pedagogy, and to ensure that like students have that deep understanding of mathematical concepts and then can draw on that and apply it in new situations, as opposed to learning procedures which can be useful for an algorithm but don't help us in our everyday lives.
Fantastic. I guess it leads to the second question, which is really very much around I guess programs like Matific being added on as a bolt-on to classroom time. What are some key ways that you can really integrate sort of that EdTech into that classroom experience? What are your feedback and suggestions there?
Yeah, definitely. And especially, I think something like Matific, I know when I went to school, we got computers when we were, I think I was 10, and we had these math programs, and you'd go at the end of the class, if you finished all your work, they'd say, go on the one class computer and just do times tables until the end of the class. And it doesn't enrich the classroom. So ensuring that the product is very curriculum aligned, that if you're using it, you're linking what you're doing in class offline with what you're doing in class online. We use workshops, which is our sort of like digital laboratories, where teachers can use them on a smart whiteboard or a projector to actually get students to interrogate these concepts together as a class, learn from each other on the board using a digital technology, break off into groups, have that same activity and start working through that digital laboratory together. But just to ensure the like full curriculum alignment through online and offline instruction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Darcy. And certainly last but not least, Mike, keen to hear a few thoughts around some questions coming in. What are the sorts of feedback that you're getting from parents and educators around Buzzy Games?
Yeah, so this has definitely been a surprise. Like, we're getting feedback that we didn't go in thinking that we'd get, and we ended up in some areas that we definitely didn't plan on. So some of the feedback we've been really surprised at is how much value has been put on the social, especially in the last 9 months. So we were always collaborative about product from day one. So when kids come into our platform, they build a small piece of a bigger thing, and then they go on. So initially, I'd say, pre-COVID, we weren't getting a lot of that feedback. So that was interesting post-COVID that the parents and also the teachers really valued the social connection and the fact that they were continuing afterwards. So they weren't just doing it in class, they were going home, and at least half of them were still working on their projects and connecting to each other. So that was great for us, because that's one of our key areas we wanted to deliver on, but we weren't seeing it a year ago. So, and the other side of things was surprising that we went in trying to map to the digital technology curriculum, but over half of our users are outside of that. So we were surprised that we had English teachers, Year 7 English teachers, use our game design kits to deliver components on, modules on ancient Rome. So now we've sort of let go of this burden on us, because we are not primarily educators, we are developers and designers. That is not our burden anymore, and we let the teachers lead us in what areas they want to map to or use our projects for. Yes, that's been surprising.
And so, Mike, just a question on that then. Obviously, with the cross-curricular links, have you then mapped to those specific curriculum areas?
Yeah, I think we've mapped to maybe no more than 8 or 10 areas, and everything else has been the teachers have been taking our kits and mapping it themselves, and then we provide help where we can. Some have needed some suggestions about what areas, but really, for the last 9 months, it's been led by the teachers themselves.
And I guess final question, just a really quick sort of differentiation between the Buzzy platform and STEM offerings like Code Camps. Can you just give us a quick rundown on that?
Yeah, sure. I think Code Camps were great to start, but for us, there needs to be a lot more done. So an ongoing relationship, not just a weekend or a school holiday relationship with a learner who has so many challenges, and also the accessibility. So unfortunately, Code Camps, while awesome, are very limited to the privileged and are not accessible both in location, cost. So that's the difference for us. We need to deliver at scale. We need to make it accessible, and Code Camps, just by their business model, do not allow for those sorts of goals.
Wonderful. Okay, I guess I'm going to throw one last question to each of you. So how has the pandemic increased the parental engagement with these kinds of tools for their children's use at school or at home?
Well, that's a good one. I'll start. I think the first thing is this is something that very few parents have ever learnt. And so while, when they bring home algebra, or their kids bring home algebra in year 7, they get some PTSD reminders of what it was like for them at school. With coding, there is just almost no support available at home whatsoever. So I think the critical nature of platforms and tools that provide some out-of-hours support or some automated feedback and so on that can actually help a student get unstuck is really critical in the digital technology space, because the majority of parents would be learning this at exactly the same time as their kids.
Excellent, James. Very interesting. I'm one of those parents. Anyone else for some very quick insights? Darcy. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, we actually we launched a whole new parent portal during COVID because we saw how important it was, especially we're in 60 different countries in 40 different languages, and we have lots of lockdown. Parents are helping their kids at home, and really, traditionally, parents don't know what their kids are doing at school. They'll ask them, "What are you doing?" Stuff. How are you doing? Well. So we actually launched a portal to ensure that they really can get involved, and we've had massive uptake around the world of parents getting involved and staying a key stakeholder in their child's education.
Wonderful, excellent. A quick update, anything from you, Mike or Adrian, to add before we kind of wrap this part of the...
Just that the education globally of parents and educators, just in that short space of time, has been amazing. 2 years ago, I had a hard time convincing more than 5% of parents why their kids should be online, live, Zoom with a coach that might be on the other side of the world, or why a teacher would have, someone come into their classroom via Zoom. So that has been amazing. I think the opportunities for everyone here to have an impact using those sorts of channels is, just we're barely scratching the surface. And then, so the second thing was just the parents, the desire to get involved but not wanting to go too deep has also been a learning for us. So really, parents didn't want the reports and the stats and they just wanted to be there, to understand the journey and just to be sure that their kids were getting paid. So I think we've learned some lessons there, not to over-engineer our reporting and data and all the rest of it.
Perfect. And Adrian, there's one interesting question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'd like to ask you something that's come in the chat panel, which is we're looking for essentially men. How do we encourage girls and other, I guess, underserved groups kind of not see STEM as a boys' club? Do you want to just comment on that before we wrap?
For sure. That's one thing I'm very, very aware of. And I noticed that when I'm running a program, sometimes you'll see that the girls will sit back and the boys will take over. And you can see they've got questions and the boys are just going crazy. I'm very, very certain to ensure that that doesn't just be the end of the story, that the girls are involved and they do get to, ask the questions, get involved with the technology. Because if you just let that be, that's what happens. The boys just grab the technology, and the girls sort of sit to the back. And so we're very keen on making sure that doesn't happen. And the other thing too about teaching AI to the younger students is we want to spark that interest very, very early. I know that if there's some research out there that if girls aren't engaged with STEM by year 5, it's over for them. They're not interested anymore. So part of the reason why I bring this, technology of artificial intelligence into the middle primary school area is to spark that interest as early as possible for girls, particularly because we don't want them to drop out of the STEM space. The research shows that they do very, very early on. So I'm trying to address that by being in that space and actively, when I'm in a school, actively ensuring that they are participating to the same level as everybody.
Wonderful. Well, Adrian, Darcy, James and Mike, thank you so much for your presentations and your insights on those valuable questions. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's a really nice segue in terms of role models and women in STEM for me to introduce two of our next members who are joining us for our In Conversation case. I'm very lucky and fortunate to be introducing Malyn Mawby, who's a continuing teacher and head of personalised learning at Roseville College. A little bit of background noise, so maybe someone might on mute.
I might try to just use this. There we go. Can you hear me?
You have made a positive impact already, Malyn. That's fantastic. So I guess handing over to the women in the room now. So just we have Malyn Mawby. Previously, prior to coming to Roseville College, has had a successful career in the corporate IT space in banking, finance and manufacturing systems. And she brings a wealth of experience and wisdom into her present career as an educator. So we're really excited to have you on board. Joining is also her colleague, Nikki Shires, who's head of digital technologies and also STEAM club coordinator at Roseville College. Nikki, just a bit of background, teaches technology and applied science studies and leads the digital technologies at Roseville College. Obviously, with over 15 years of teaching experience, there's a lot of accumulated skills and knowledge in that digital technologies and STEM-related learning, which has helped to guide in this digital technology experience. So I'm very excited to have both of you joining part of our conversation today on a very interesting topic and obviously a wonderful opportunity to explore the great things happening at Roseville. So I guess I'd like to kick off, and Malyn, if I can begin with you, can you give us some tips for successfully implementing project-based learning in a digital environment?
Sure thing. Firstly, what is project-based learning? I should probably start with that one. So project-based learning is a way of putting everything together within a project. And a project meaning you have a goal and you have a start and you have an end, essentially, as a very simplistic way of defining what a project is. And it is a pedagogical approach in terms of teaching content and integrating process, tools, skills, etc. So my tips in making it successful, at least in my experience, is to really plan, particularly if you're involving technology. We know that when you're using digital technologies, then plan A may not necessarily be enough, so always have a backup plan. As a teacher, we have to connect whatever we do with the syllabus because we are quite time poor in the classroom. So whatever we do in the classroom has to somehow be justified by the fact that it is part of the syllabus or an extension or an enrichment. But ultimately, it needs to connect to what we have to teach. It's also a good idea, particularly with the digital technology platform, to leverage our options in terms of multimodal, not just delivery, but also for kids to be able to create their products in a multimodal way. What else? Oh, and a big thing that probably one of the last lessons I've learned with PBL, people have always said, the proponents of PBL said that you got to have a public audience, meaning you got to have an audience bigger than the classroom, bigger than the teacher and the other students. And I find that that has actually helped with engagement and authenticity of projects. So having a public audience bigger than the classroom or beyond the classroom is another thing to kind of think about. Yeah.
So Malyn, I'd just like to take a little bit of an opportunity before we jump into Nikki's insights. When you talk about the audience being bigger than the classroom itself, can you talk about what that means and how you actually done that at Roseville?
Yeah, sure. So I've had different options. So some, for example, in my data science unit with my year 10s last year, modeling and simulations, we used one of our school data sets, which is the Moresby data set, which look at student skills and interests. And so as part of our audience for their data visualizations, I invited the careers professional here so that she could see how we have used the data. And even more interestingly is for her to see that having different people look at her data set, we actually see other things as well. So it's not just us winning, she was also winning. Another option is, because I teach computing, I try to get the digital product out there somehow. So for example, one of the things that I've started exploring is using GitHub to publish websites, for example. And another one, occasionally, once you start making things public, people do find you. And one of the stories there is when my students did a case study on artificial intelligence and the impact of artificial intelligence on society. So the students extrapolated their findings, or their analysis, I should say, in a sci-fi environment, the Marvel universe, in fact. And the DT Tech Hub, so Digital Technologies Hub, found our story and featured us. So if you're ever interested what year 10s could do, for example, then go into the Digital Tech Hubs and our story is there, and you can see the products that they have seen. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. A really nice way of connecting, I guess, school with the much wider business and broader community. So,
absolutely,
Nikki, I might just ask you for a few of your insights, just around. Obviously, we did have a question through the chat panel, which is kind of going back and understanding what PBL actually. Give us a rundown from your perspective, and then I'm keen to hear what your successful tips are, in addition to obviously hearing what Malyn's shared with us.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would start with, I'm looking at it from a perspective of a whole school perspective. I'm looking at it from the junior school, senior school, and from co-curricular. And I would say that, speaking specifically of co-curricular, that is a really good place that we have found to trial PBL, and anything that is something that might be something that we can integrate into the classroom. Just like Malyn had said, we have to stick to the curriculum, and it's really important that we find everything we do has value in the classroom. And so using our co-curricular space like the STEAM Club, we've been able to sort of trial lots of different digital technologies specifically, but also project-based learning projects. And I think that's been really successful. The other thing I would mention is and I have an example in project-based learning in the junior school. I think with project-based learning, I don't know, I didn't actually see the question that was put up there, but and my understanding of project-based learning is to be incorporating more than just your one subject or the one topic into one area of learning into a project, and also to bring that authenticity to it. And so I think everything that I try to co-create with the teachers at school, it does have that authenticity. And one of the examples we did last year in year 3 was we were trying to play with coding, and we do Lego robots to design something, and to try to integrate it into something that they already had going. And so we brought it into the art space, and we made art spinners. And we did that, myself and a teacher together. We sort of team taught together. And that is one of the really important things about the project-based learning and using digital technologies in schools, is to try to bring in more than just one expert and to teach it together, so then you can start to build on those skills for future. So everyone who starts to work there feels more empowered and able to use that in a deeper way. So those are 2 examples.
Brilliant. And can I just ask one deeper question, just around the way that you are doing it at Roseville, which is that sort of co-curricular space. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? It's obviously not part of the core learning of that classroom. And so just give us a little bit of rundown about what that co-curricular looks like at Roseville.
Well, I guess it's shaped really by the students. We have had different cohorts come through, and every year I try to shape it with the students who are part of that club. And we design projects that are relevant for themselves, but also things that we might be interested in trying out in a classroom setting. And so it's after school activities. We generally, speaking to Malyn's topic about bringing authenticity into it and having an audience, one of the audiences that we have is the local community. And so we try to bring in what we do into the local community. So using the newsletter, for example, we're currently doing a robotics program that is for juniors from 5 and 6 and 7. But our senior students, years 8, 9, and 10, are the mentors, and they're actually running the program. And so giving them that platform to be leaders, to showcase their own learning and also deepen their own learning, that, and then putting that into the school community newsletter to share that with the community. All of those things are wins for us, and showing that not only robotics and coding can be done with girls, but also that it's a safe space for them, and they're really empowered there.
Wonderful, thank you. Malyn, I might just switch over to you for the next sort of interesting insight, which is obviously you both talk about the importance of embedding this within curriculum, and obviously a very crowded curriculum and time poor. So can you talk to us about obviously the outcomes and then the key considerations when assessing project-based learning? Like what assessment framework do you use, and how does that kind of meet the core outcomes of project-based learning?
Yeah, fantastic. I've also seen a couple of questions about what project-based learning is. Now, there is no definitive description or explanation of what it really is. And if you Google what's the difference between PBL and inquiry and problem-based learning, which is typical in mathematics, for example, how are they all different? Well, I guess the main important thing about PBL really is that the L part. It is about learning. So we don't do projects as evidence of what they already know, but rather you do the project-based learning as literally you're learning as you're doing the project. And I think certainly from my experience in computing in the industry, we kind of did projects where we were learning as we go, because as technology evolves, you kind of like, okay, we've used the next big next programming language. Well, we better learn that one now because we need it right now. And it's kind of like that in a project-based learning. So the things that you want the kids to learn are embedded within the activities of the project. So as part of planning the project, you got to think about, how will I know that the students are actually learning the skills or the concepts that are part of the syllabus? So in terms of planning a PBL, I actually start from the end. So there is a nice framework for that from PBL Works, and it's called the gold standard of project-based learning, and they're very much outcomes based. So they're saying, well, what are the outcomes that you want? Okay, so for these outcomes, then how can the kids show that they have hit those outcomes? And if they can show it that way, what do you need to teach them so that they can then do that as well? And so it's not unlike what we used to do in IT with our project management processes. We'll say, well, what's the end deliverable? And for us to develop this bit of software, what are the components of that software? And for us to develop those components, how do we then build that? And do we need to do any training so that we can do that? So it's very, very similar. So for me, doing PBL is like doing what I used to do in the industry. So to wrap up again, in short, so doing PBL is really planning what you want to assess at the end. So what do you want the kids to learn? How do you know that they have learned it? And how do you build in your teaching activities so that the learning activities that happen will then create this product that show that the kids have in fact learned something?
And Malyn, I know we talk a lot about empowering our learners and our students to be part of that process. To what degree do you actually empower your students in that.
Yeah, my favorite part. It's actually quite interesting because students have become so complicit in terms of what they need to do. And so what Nikki was saying earlier, that it's student driven. We can do it in extracurricular, so we're giving that opportunity. In the classroom, I try to do that by asking the students, what are you interested in? And then let's go for that. So say, for example, last year in year 9, IST, when we're doing microcontrollers, we were using Adafruit Circuit Playground Express. And then I said, what sort of applications might we use this for? And we just did a brainstorm. And ultimately, we went for to help with disabilities. And in our study of disabilities or accessibility, when we're studying web design, for example, we have learned, or the kids have learned, that disability is not just physical disability. You're also talking about cognitive disability as well. So that kind of came into the theme of the project itself. So, but for us to get to that point of getting students to be confident enough that they can work on something that they're interested in, it does take a lot of relationship building, so that they can trust you, that they will come out of the whole project-based learning stuff, successful in the sense that they have built something, they have learned something. Yeah.
Wonderful. Nikki, I'm keen to hear your insights around that assessment framework. I know you're looking at it from a junior through to senior school and a whole school approach. Do you want to just share a couple of your insights in addition to Malyn's?
I look at the building frameworks around the skills in which that they can start to build. So sort of linking to what Malyn had said about really knowing what you're assessing when you're going into the PBL projects. You need to really be clear on what you're actually aiming to get at. So something I've actually learned working with Malyn is to try to build frameworks into our development of all of our programs, is to know where we're actually aiming to hit by year 12 or beyond. And so starting all the way back to kindy and really highlighting what we are actually trying to attain as we go through. And so I'm starting to build a digital literacy framework for the whole school. I also have built-in robotic encoding frameworks. So we sort of align the EdTech that we use with those different age groups, and we try to make sure that all of they are aligning with the skills that they're trying to eventually achieve. And so by doing that, then we start knowing those skills, and then we don't. I definitely think that you have to incorporate your student perspective, but not all classes have that flexibility. Year 7 and 8, there's a lot of students, and you don't have as much time to sort of open those doors. So we have to sort of build in those things for them. And so using those frameworks really helps. An example that Malyn and I actually have worked on was using exactly those things to build a technology unit that is in its nature, because technology is basically a project-based learning, which is why both Malyn and I love it, I think. It really incorporates such a range of skills, and we wanted to make sure that we were really highlighting to the students that they were doing that. They were learning multiple things at the same times, and so they could start making those links. So as we started to develop that program, we started to use a visual language to actually show when there were links to the maths curriculum, or there was links to the science or technology or engineering, whatever it was, and digital technology, all of those incorporated into that one. And so that for us really helped us shape that program that was already a pretty good program, but really starting to draw out those other things and really enrich that learning for the students.
So it definitely sounds like the programs are definitely around student insights and obviously creating student agency and interest in obviously the end result as well as the process or the journey. Can you talk to me about how do we encourage the collaboration between students digitally when they're working on these projects? And I guess especially in the light of COVID, now. I'm not sure, Nick, if you wanted to kick off, and then we ask Malyn to kind of come in and share her insights.
I think I'm going to let Malyn talk about that, because this was her question. So I think she has better insights on that.
Brilliant. Okay, over to you, Malyn.
All right. Collaboration, but particularly in assessment, is problematic in the sense that some students feel like, as we do as adults, that not everyone pulls their weight, or that some people who are more talented or more skilled end up doing more of the work. Now, some teachers would shy away from that and say, well, yeah, you're right, and marking group work is extremely difficult. However, I know from experience that if you're not exposed to a problem, then you wouldn't know how you would react if you're given that problem in the first place. So one of the things that I designed for my year 11 software students was to have a team project where they have to analyze existing modules or existing commercial systems out there and try to reverse engineer what it does. Now, this is what I planned in 2020. And of course, COVID hit. Now, what COVID has done is make it a lot more complex for me to run a group activity that is complex in itself already. And then you have this like, oh no, now they can't see each other. But what it did make me think was that, well, hold on, this is what I used to do working on global teams. If I could do it back then, way back then, surely we can do it now. Surely we have the tools. And so in fact, I did set up a Microsoft Teams site for my class and created little channels for all the different project teams, and within those channels they were able to collaborate, meaning they could work they could meet face to face, and I could join in those meetings, and they could do it synchronously, meaning when we're scheduled to be on, and asynchronously when they feel like it. And then also all their within teams, because they have their own channels, they have their own document space where they can work on their documentation. Yes, software design requires a lot of documentation, where they can work on their documentation with built-in version control, and I could go in and give them feedback. So essentially what I have done, without necessarily thinking about it too much when I first designed it, was create a little case, a context that was very, very much true to industry by virtue of the pandemic. The pandemic has forced us to work as if we were in virtual teams.
And are there any other, I guess, surprise outcomes that you found during COVID? I think that's one of them in getting students to collaborate and interact. What are some other surprises that came out of that?
To be honest, well, a lot of my students actually said that was one of their highlights in 2020 in terms of their learning experiences. But a few of them actually said, so this is what my dad does, right? So I think there's still quite a few parents who are still working from home. And I think now they have a little bit more empathy with their parents who are actually working from home, knowing what the challenges were in terms of being challenged with just seeing them on odd occasions. And then you only see like this little fraction of a body instead of the whole, so you miss out on the whole body language kind of thing, and a whole lot of other missing cues because we're limited by the screen. So I think that one, the fact that they really enjoyed it because they felt it made the syllabus come alive, but then also the fact that they have more empathy for the adults and having a sense of what it might be like to work remotely is really fantastic. In fact, last year was the first time ever in my computing teaching career that I've never had to explain what teleconferencing or video conferencing was. It's like they all knew, like in the past, it was like this obscure little thing in the syllabus. Yeah.
Wonderful. I guess that leads nicely into an interesting question where we've talked a lot about student agency and students championing these projects. You've just kind of looked at and shared with us a bit of a surprise outcome, which is that parental impact at home and the working from home. Can you talk a little bit about how parents are on board and how you actually go about engaging the parents as equally as you do the students?
Well, curricularly, for me, I find, particularly with my senior students, I think most of their parents are actually working in IT. So, yay, the parents who are encouraging their daughters to actually do software. But other ways that I have engaged parents are to invite industry experts to actually come into my classroom. I haven't done it yet here in Roseville College, but previously, when I was, say, for example, in Barker College, I met a parent who happened to work at Google, and I said, "Oh, can I take my class?" And he goes, "Yeah." So, that was a really good opportunity for us to then have an excursion to Google that he arranged. But I'd like Nikki to add on to that with the way she's also engaging parents.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I think I put a few notes on this because this is an interesting question for me. I think like the gentleman we're talking about earlier, it was a big shock to a lot of the parents having everything kind of come home and them seeing what was happening, and all of a sudden they're very engaged in the learning. And as a parent, I know that was challenging and really interesting. But I guess I think what's really most important to do is when we start designing things for students is to start with the students to get their sort of buy-in and their acceptance. And generally the rest will follow. I know that the parents, like one of the gentlemen said, that parents hardly know what's happening at school. And so for us, we obviously do care about what the parents want for the students, but they have trusted us as educators to sort of take them on their learning journey. And I think for me, it always comes back to getting that buy-in and that investment with the students. And so that's what both Malyn and I have both been talking about already through all of our designing of our assessments. I also think we've done something different last year. At the end of last year, we did a combination with science and technology, sort of a project-based learning, non-assessment project. And that was something that we thought we could successfully do because it was non-assessable. And I think parents are much more on board with that, because I think sometimes with project-based learning, and students, not just parents, they get worried, like where are my marks going to go, and how is this going, how are these other people going to affect my marks? And so this is more for the senior students, of course. But and so we ran this engineering science fair, which was very time poor in the time that we did just because of COVID, but it was hugely successful for the time that we gave it. And that is mainly because there was no pressure from the students to have an assessment mark at the end of it. So they could be really open to that collaborative learning and to all the soft skills that you learn from that project-based type learning. And of course, we used the newsletter and all the kind of media outlets for the parents to see that kind of learning happening. And I think that for me is the way to get that buy-in from the parents. But yeah, I mean, that's not the one-stop solution, but that is one way that we've done it.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, you've just highlighted with that particular project, in fact, that we had a bigger audience, because at the end of the engineering project, engineering unit, if you like, we had a showcase. So essentially, just going back to what I said earlier about having an audience that's bigger than just the classroom, that was exactly one of it, and also being able to share through other platforms such as the newsletter. So it gives them another audience, and I think the kids like being accountable to people other than themselves and a teacher. So when you tell them, and I do with the PBL, that if it's going to be public, I tell them right from the beginning. So they know straight away that the audience is beyond just me and the marks. It's beyond that. And they can use it. And more I say this to the kids, that they can use it as part of their portfolio. This is something that they should work towards being proud of, because it's going to be out there. So yeah, it's not just parents, beyond parents too. Yeah.
And I think that one of the questions coming through the chat panel is very much around, should we move away from assessment to data gathering, which is on the right things? Can you maybe comment on that and your insights there?
Well, I'm a data nerd. I love data, but I also know the limitations of data. And the limitations, the constraints of the school. Whether we like it or not, schools are accountable in terms of what we teach and how we assess what we teach. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any, unless we change the entire education structure, I don't think there's any running away from assessments and collecting those data. Now, being a data nerd, however, I do know that there are other ways of collecting data other than assessments, and there are other, you should not be limited by an assessment to make whatever you do meaningful. And the way I see it is that data is just data unless you build a story around it. And we teachers and students alike, we have an opportunity to shape that story. And we can either just say, well, this is just an assessment, or we can say, you know what, this is one way to prove that I can do this, this, and that. And I think it's a reframing, as I'd like to say. You know, you reframe this. We have to do the assessment. Yeah, well, okay, fine. Now, do you take that as a limitation, or do you take that as a springboard for other things? Enrich what we're currently doing. Yeah. I get off my high horse now.
Well, I guess in that reframing that you talk about, you know, who do you have to convince more? Principal, parent, student?
Myself. I have to convince myself
teachers,
every time.
The brunt of the load doesn't fall onto the teacher.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's a whole school shift. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but I know that it is definitely trending at schools at the moment, and it takes more than just the principal to decide that. You have to get everyone on board, because the teachers are expected to shift a lot of the way they gather their data for assessment or understanding of the students. So, but I am not the expert in data. Malyn is.
Excellent.
Excellent. Some very interesting kind of discussions around assessment and data. I guess just changing the lens just slightly, there has been some questions just through the chat around, I guess, girls in STEM. But does that really, you know, in terms of the overall success in STEM, is that the focus? Or what are the high level considerations we need to make to engage all in STEM and these project-based kind of approaches?
I can start with my thoughts on that. I just being at an all-girls school has been a completely interesting experience to see how STEM or STEM-related subjects are taken in by girls. Definitely, when you're in an all-girls space, there is more scope. There's more space for them to feel that they can achieve in those without the competition of the boys. But my lens, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I don't look at it like that. I look at it, how do I get my students to be interested in what I'm teaching them? And if it's robotics or coding, I say, okay, what is it going to take to get them their buy-in? And for me, with girls, it is sometimes different to what boys want, and that could be subject. Like, for example, Malyn had said they chose to do gadgets for people with disabilities, and that's what they chose. But for the way I would definitely frame it is, it's not a girl thing. It's just how do you get them to buy in? And what I have found from my personal experience at Roseville College is to angle it in different ways, not to always put it with the coding and this and that, but to bring in other aspects and let them enjoy that experience. And usually creativity comes and really creativity is one of those soft skills that we need anyway. And so if you can get them to go in that door, all the rest will come.
Excellent. Malyn, have you got
it? Oh my gosh. Do we have time for this? Right. This is something that I'm very, very passionate about, because I work in the industry. And for a very long time, the narrative has been talking about it's a pipeline problem, right? We need more kids, more girls going in. But I see it as there's a whole lot more. There's loads of problems. There's a pipeline problem, which is not as bad, I think, as the leaky pipe problem. We're losing people, or the leaky bucket. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. Girls, I think, are quite long-term in their thinking, right? And so if they don't see themselves being in a STEM career for a very long time, they might not stay. They might be interested now, but they may not even go there if they can't see their future in there. So I think if we are really going to address this, and I look at this not just from a gender perspective, but really from an inclusivity perspective. This is what I talk about when we talk about ethics, social ethical impacts within my courses, is that the issue of diversity and inclusion. And gender is certainly the most important, well, not the most important, but it's probably the most visible manifestation of it, but it's beyond that. And every time I can make a point of that within my classrooms, I tell them that. And I tell them that you cannot fix something by being out of it, but by being in it. So that's kind of how I try to encourage the girls to say, you know, if you're finding injustices in the world and you know now that computing allows you to scale, can you imagine what you can do if you're part of it? So it's sort of like helping them imagine what they can do if they just attempt and not give up straight away, and not kind of like be swayed too much about what they see, but like really more about imagining what they can be and what they can do by creating technology, by being empowered by technology, and by really, my mantra is make technology more humane. And I think we can only do that by really accepting the differences that we have, whether it's by gender or by ability or by skin color. Look at me, like, you know, I'm Asian. Then, you know, if the more diversity is, the richer we are. And we can only do that if we all participate.
I feel like we could go on a lot in that, and I wish we had a lot more time. I guess just to look, you talk a lot, both of you've talked a lot about creativity, obviously keeping that engagement for particularly the girls long term. We've got consumers versus creators of these sort of digital technologies. It might actually be a nice opportunity for you to share sort of your lens through the creating mode versus the consumer mode, and how you kind of build that long-term involvement in STEM programs.
Nikki.
All right, I'll start. I'll start in the junior school. I have noticed that ever since the digital technologies and science curriculum has come into K-6, there's a lot of new language to learn. And so what we've done is we've taken that language and we've made that common. And so I think for us, that's the way we have started that journey with the girls, to shift from consumer to creator, is to immediately say, empower them with the language. And so when they start to design something, maybe 2 years ago, it would have been very similar to just a gamification of something, but now they're using the language and they're going, actually, I could be a creator for this, and that just shift in their mind is such a lovely thing to see in the junior levels. And I've been at Roseville College for a few years now. I'm starting to see that coming through, and I think it takes time. That kind of thing does take time to shift. But for me, absolutely really important for them to know that they can be creators, not just consumers, and starting from the very onset of their learning journey.
Wonderful. Malyn, I know this would be our last question, so I'm keen to think of any insights to share on that question as well.
Okay. I think because, as Nikki said, we teach technology, so that's our faculty. We definitely teach them to be consumers of technology as well as creators of technology. I think one of the challenges that I'm not sure many non-technology teachers are aware of is that it's actually very difficult to manage the expectations of students. So if you're, for example, you've got a gamer student, and then you say, all right, for this one, we're going to create games. It's very difficult for them to realize that what they can do may not necessarily even approximate the games that they play that have been developed by professional developers. So I think just a word of caution, I guess, certainly encourage students to realize that they are creators. But I think as adults, as the teachers in the room, it is our job to help them manage their expectations to what they can create within a given set, within a particular time frame. And they will get there. I have no doubt that they will get there if they choose to, but they may not get there in the 4 weeks that we have our PBL on.
Yeah, I think that's really realistic insights for all of us to learn, particularly, I guess, the students that we're working with in that classroom. Malyn and Nikki, we could go on for another hour, I'm sure. It's an area that I love speaking about. I really thank you on behalf of all of us for your time and your really valuable insights around project-based learning in that digital environment, particularly at Roseville. So thank you so much for your time. I wish we had more opportunity to discuss those further questions, but thank you again. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delvin.
And David, I think this is now my opportunity to ask you to come back into the space to conclude this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Dal. Actually, I think Peter Mackey is going to do our official close. So Peter is the Director of International Trade at Treasury New South Wales. I think that's the current department name and your title, Peter, isn't it?
It is, David. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Although it was announced today, we are moving back to the Premier's department. So as of this afternoon, that is correct, but maybe not tomorrow.
All right. We'll get an update in the morning.
Yeah, interesting. Look, thank you so much, first of all, for such an amazing session. As a former teacher and EdTech developer myself, I found it really fascinating. So was really pleased to be involved. So I guess my role is primarily just to thank EduGrowth for this opportunity and for everyone involved in pulling today's event together. Malyn and Nikki, as I said, those insights were really interesting. Also to our EdTechs for their showcase. So Buzzy Games, Grok Learning, Matific and Neuranext. Really just always such a pleasure to hear people, creative people, talk about, obviously passionately the projects that they have conceived and developed. And then thanks to you, Delvin, too, for keeping us on track as the MC. I've just been observing the chat throughout the afternoon, and obviously those who have joined today have obviously been clearly very engaged, and so great to see a high level of interaction. I think we're all learning to use this kind of technology much better than we did before. And I think if the importance of digital platforms to support students in their learning wasn't clear before the pandemic, it certainly is now, and that really was borne out in some of the discussions. Just very quickly, a little bit for those who don't know about Study New South Wales, it was set up in 2014 to support the international education sector, and a key part of that is obviously the education technology part of that equation. And given the close links between that and international education, one of our core functions is about supporting the state's EdTech sector to forge closer connections both here in New South Wales, but also to try and identify some global connections. We're lucky here in New South Wales. I think we've got one of the largest and most vibrant hubs of EdTech companies and startups around the country. I think the figure that's quoted often is that Sydney is home to around over 40% of Australia's startups, and I think we've got close to 200 EdTech companies at least based here in Sydney. And yeah, look, I mean the global market for EdTech is just, I think, outstripping all forecasts, particularly as a result of COVID. I think I've heard figures thrown around, but it's something like 7 billion, valued at 7 billion in 2019, and no doubt much more by now. So look, as I mentioned, we're really delighted to be part of today. We'd love to support more future showcases like this, David. So please do let us know. I'd like to thank EduGrowth again, and I hope today's been a great exercise, valuable exercise for those involved. So I'll hand back to you, David, or Delvin.
I think it's coming back to me. Thanks so very much, Peter. I really do appreciate it. Whilst we're actually doing this, I'm looking up the number of EdTech companies that are in New South Wales for you, because we were just doing this analysis right now. So it is a great opportunity for Australian and New South Wales EdTech companies to be able to showcase their products to prospective customers, and the support of Study is greatly appreciated, but also the support of ClickView. Dal, you did a fantastic job today. We really appreciate what you've done. And we do appreciate what ClickView do, which is one of Australia's leading EdTech companies, and supporting all stage companies through their strategic partnership with EduGrowth. So it's really fantastic. I'd also like to add my thanks to Malyn and Nikki, who did a great job to be able to engage. And I had the great pleasure of jumping over to the Slido platform, which is where delegates are, and seeing the conversation that was going on there. So that's fantastic. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful. So, David, I think that's maybe over to me for the final thank you.
Yes.
So thank you, Peter. Thank you, EduGrowth, and thank you to everyone that's joined, as well as our presenters. And I know that it is an honour for ClickView to be partnering with EduGrowth. We certainly love helping to fuel these kinds of discussions about really important educational topics that are close to our hearts. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening ahead, and we look forward to the next session.